Welcome to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco, bringing you interviews with industry experts and regular folks who tested the job search waters and succeeded, and strategies to tell your story and land you job interviews in 60 days, guaranteed. Here's your host, Virginia Franco.
Hello, everyone. I am delighted to introduce my latest guest to the Resume Storyteller podcast. I have with me Scott Anthony Barlow, the founder and CEO of HappentoYourCareer and host of the HappentoYourCareer podcast. His company combines the latest research about human happiness and career change to help thousands of professionals identify and change to well-paying, meaningful careers that they are absolutely in love with. He's been featured on CNBC, Yahoo, Fast Company, HuffPost, and tons of colleges and universities as a top expert on career happiness. So, Scott Anthony, thank you so much. I'm just delighted to have you with me.
I am delighted to be here. This is going to be fun.
So, just a quick 15-second intro, but give us a quick overview of what you do, what your company does, and how you came to be in this role in the first place.
Well, the how I came to be could take longer than 15 seconds for sure. But
you have longer. I did that 15 seconds to begin with. You have all the time in the world.
Well, I'll tell you, what we do, the core of what we do is we help high achievers and high performers that have been in different jobs, been in different careers, and in a lot of cases run up the ladder or been in those roles and realized because of one reason or another that where they're at is not where they want to be. And it's not as fulfilling as they either thought it would be, or they fell into a job, or any number of other things. But they want to make a change, and they don't necessarily always know exactly what a fulfilling life and career looks like for them. And they want to figure that out. And that is exactly what we do. We help people figure out what fulfillment and happiness looks like through the lens of their career and the life that they want to live. And we help them make that happen. And that is it. That's really what we do. It sounds a bit weird as an organization, but that is what we do with all of our clients and students. And
because everyone's happiness is different, right?
It is. And I mean, if we really get into the details and the research and everything like that, then happiness is a really interesting and fickle thing, to put it mildly. But really what we do is we help people identify the situations where they can create more happiness in their life more often. And those situations that are continually giving them energy and giving them fulfillment, and doing that much more frequently and much more aligned with what they value most in life. And that can sound really ambiguous, but that is really the core of what we do. And we can talk a little bit about how that happens and how to make that happen as we go along here. But really,
so did your unhappiness sort of launch you into this?
That's exactly where it came from. It's been, oh my goodness, it's been since about 2000, early 2000s or so. One of the first professional jobs that I had, I hated it, quite frankly. It was terrible. It was not a great fit. It was what most people on the outside would look at and go, hey, that's a great job. And it just was not a great fit for me at all. And every day I was driving to work. It was a 2-hour commute. I was, just trudging along, looking at people walking faster than our traffic was moving. And I was, I know. I eventually realized, look, I've got to do something about this. So I went and I talked to my boss. I finally built up the courage to go talk to my boss and told him, hey, maybe I made a bad decision. Maybe this isn't a great fit. And he apparently thought so too, because he ended up firing me about 3 weeks later. And that was the
word. Okay.
Yeah, that was the impetus for how all of this happened. And I realized as I set about making the move to that next job, I didn't want to repeat the past. I wanted to make sure that as I was going into my next role, that it was something that was fulfilling and also well-paying and made me more happy more frequently. So that was what set me on this about 10-year journey to figure out how to do that for myself. And then along the way, I started having all kinds of people buy me coffee and ask me how I did it. And that's what later on turned into this company.
Oh, wow. So what do you see as sort of a couple of major challenges facing people that come to you, that they're not happy, but they don't know where to start?
I think that with many different people that we work with in particular, they've known something is off for a while, but a lot of times, and this is going to sound a little bit weird, but go with me for just a second.
Okay.
I'll give you an example here. One of the people that we worked with, her name was Laura, and she was in a very high paying role. She had a team of people, and for all intents and purposes, like the people she worked with were pretty passionate about what they did, and the company was good to her. She had lots of flexibility and autonomy, but it really was not causing her to grow in the way that she wanted to. And her entire life, she'd been, kind of an A student, sort of checking the boxes, high performer, et cetera, et cetera. And she'd done all the right things. And this is really kind of the first time in her life where she had not known what was next. And that may or may not sound like a big deal, but that was really, really painful for her because she knew that, she'd had a track record of performance and she knew that she could do a lot of different things or learn to do a lot of different things if she wanted to, but she didn't know necessarily what that was. And as weird as it sounds, that's one of the things that was holding her back initially, is trying to identify where to even begin and how to begin answering these crazy questions like, well, what could I do with my time, and what should I do with my time, and what would be fulfilling, and what lines up with what I'm great at and the skill sets and experiences that I have that would make me more happy more frequently.
I am a fellow list checker, and the thought of not knowing what's next is terrifying. So
I know it is.
Certainly see, yeah. So once you start working with your clients, is there something that, as they're going through discovery process or through this journey, that you find that they're sort of most surprised by, that catches them off guard?
I think yes, there's several things, but I think the biggest surprise is how this stuff actually works in terms of finding a career that lines up with what you really want. And it's challenging because, like, if you take Laura, she was considering a few different things, but really didn't know if, product development was going to be a great route for her or whether this other thing was going to be a great route for her. And she really didn't want to waste any more time either. So a lot of times when people are in this situation, they feel a couple of different types of pressure. One is the pressure to not, when you're mid-career, you don't want to start over. Like, nobody wants to start over. Nobody wants to go backwards and pay. Sure. Yeah. And we sort of have this perception. And if there's anything that I really want to do over the next about 5 years or so, is really eliminate a lot of this perception, because we've very much found it to be false, that you have to choose happiness or money. And
you think you can have both?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we've seen, the crazy thing that we've seen is we've worked with clients over 90%. And I haven't run the numbers in the last few months, but last time we did, well over 90% of them were increasing their salaries as they were making moves into roles and companies and organizations that really fit what they wanted and needed to be able to be more fulfilled and have meaningful work and be more happy more often. And that flies in the face of what we believe, especially here in the United States. There is that perpetual myth that...
Yeah, if it's the job you want, the money you want, and everything you want, then it wouldn't be called a job.
Exactly.
It wouldn't be hard work. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I don't want to confuse the issue, because I don't think that there's any perfect role out there. We're human beings. Like, nothing is perfect necessarily. Right. Otherwise, we wouldn't function as human beings. But that said, there absolutely are situations that are much, much better and also create a lot of value for you in terms of pay or compensation or anything else. And that was certainly the case for Laura. So as she was moving through, that was one of the hardest things that she had to work through, as crazy as that sounds, is thinking about how she could have an and solution, that she could have both. Because when she came to us, she was making well over six figures, and she she was saying, I remember one of the conversations we had with her, and it was like, well, I guess I could go down to 80 if I needed to. It's like, well, I'm not sure that you're going to need to. You've got tons of marketable skills, and after we identify what is most important to you, it's very, very possible for you to have both. And consequently, she made a $30,000 increase as she went into the next role.
Is it your sense that the and versus the or works well regardless of what's going on in the economy? Because I'm thinking back to 2006, 2008, and it was, there's no or. It's you have a job and you're grateful for it kind of mindset, where now things are a little better economically. So it feels a little more luxurious and more of an ability to take a risk that we wouldn't have otherwise.
Let me answer that two ways. And they may seem in conflict with one another, but I'll try and explain my thoughts. So as a whole, if the economy is not doing great, like there's going to be some people that are going to experience or feel that, right? Just in terms of if it's moving up versus down, then there will be some people that are going to feel that. However, what I have realized over the years is that there is always going to be people that are going to benefit from those types of situations as well. And there were many companies, and this doesn't get as much play because it's not as sexy of a story in some cases, but there were many companies that grew throughout that time period too.
That's true.
But
That's true. There were winners and losers, you're right.
Yeah. The woe is me story, though, has a tendency to sell more, unfortunately. And what I've realized is, any individual that might be listening to this right now can choose which side of the situation that they want to be on. Because yes, maybe the economy as a whole is going down or whatever, but somebody is going to go up. So I have always wanted to, for myself, take steps to put myself in the situation where I'm going to be the exception. And I think any given person can really do that too. You can either choose to go down with the economy, or you can choose to take steps that are going to set you apart and be one of the few people that are going to move up. And I always want to know, what are people doing that are going to cause them to be the exception to the rule rather than the rule itself?
So it's a seesaw where someone goes up and someone goes down versus a slide where everyone goes down. I never thought of it that way.
And I don't even think, so here's another thought process too. Those organizations that were moving up and some of the leaders in those organizations that were moving up, I think that I look at it as my duty as somebody who wants to be the exception. I look at it as my duty to pull other people along the way. Because if I'm taking the responsibility, and that's kind of how I look at it, to be that exception, then I guess I do think that there's responsibility that goes along with it. And part of that is to bring other people up at the same time. And I think that that's kind of more a moral thing and ethic thing. I don't know if everybody agrees with that necessarily, but that's how I feel about the subject.
Yeah, no, I agree. So shifting gears a little bit, what advice would you give someone who is thinking about making a career move? Sort of they're in that spot where they haven't done anything yet. Where do they start?
This is going to sound a bit counterintuitive at first, but as I think the most important thing, since you only have so many years on the planet, then the most important thing is, especially if you're worried about wasting time or any of those other worries that have a tendency to pop up, the most important thing is to actually figure out what it is that you want and what is most important to you prior to going and taking tons of activity, making tons of activity, making that career change in the first place. And most people, you and I just talked about, like, if you're a list checker and everything like that, you want to take action because you want to feel in control and you want to get moving right away. But that actually is counterproductive in the process, where your end goal is to align your work with the life that you want to live and create more happiness, more fulfillment, more enjoyment, more frequently. So, it's like a road trip. Like, if you don't know what the destination is for the road trip, it's going to be really hard to plop it into Google Maps or your GPS or something else and chart a route to get there. And you're just going to end up driving around and you end up in Montana and I don't know. It's not going to be a great situation.
Right. You're saying, identify your deal breakers and what's important to you and what you absolutely cannot accept.
That's part of it. Absolutely. So think about it this way. To be able to identify that destination, a lot of times, you and you've worked with career changers and stuff, this, but not everybody necessarily thinks about it this way. It's most easy if you've got the most clear picture, because if you can say, I want to be an HR director in this type of company, blah, 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 then it's most easy to build that pathway to there and represent yourself via resume or branding or anything else like that. But we also find, absolutely. We also find, though, that thing number one is, job titles and things change from organization to organization. An HR director at one organization doesn't do the exact same thing as an HR director in another organization. So that part is one factor. The second part, though, is sometimes for many people, as we've really delved into the research over the years, we realize that what is going to create a great situation for you, 60 to 70% of people, what's more important than the actual work tasks itself is actually whether or not the rest of the situation, like the environment or the people that you work with, or creating the right finances so that you can achieve your other financial goals in life, or all of the things that surround that often are more important than the actual day-to-day tasks itself, which means that it's critical to identify those other pieces rather than just solely focusing on the role. It's not that the role is unimportant, because that's not true. But in many people's cases, we find, and the research suggests, that other factors are far more important. So here's the way that we look at that. Once we break it down into really what creates happiness and fulfillment, we realize that there's a number of different things. And we help people approach it in their careers much the same way you put together a puzzle. And we call this the puzzle method. So I'll give you a quick story as far as how this works out. So if you're looking to create that destination, but realize that it's not necessarily as much about a role, you really do have to think about it like a puzzle. So go back a few years where my youngest son was 2 or 3 years old. And the first time that he was putting together puzzles, I was watching him and he was taking one piece and taking another random piece, and he's like trying to mash them together, just totally jam them together, right?
That's the way I do puzzles.
Yeah, and it gets pretty frustrating pretty quickly, right? Yeah. So he had this look on his face, and he's like making this little sound. He's like, oh, and it wasn't working. So I sat down next to him and said, hey, Grayson, here, let's try it this way. Let's first take all the corner pieces and let's separate those out. And then let's see all the flat spots on the edge here? Let's take all those edge pieces and let's separate those out. Okay, now when you have the edge pieces, you can start to see what colors line up, and you can pretty easily build out the frame, right? And once you have the frame, the really cool thing is that you can start to see what the picture might be in the middle without even having the box as a cheat sheet, right? And the crazy thing here is that most of us as human beings, when we go to change careers, we are doing the exact same thing as what Grayson was doing, where you're grabbing a random piece and you're like, I need a boss that's really supportive. And you're grabbing another random piece and you're like, I need a place where I get more autonomy. And you're like trying to mash them together and you're like, okay, now what? And then a lot of people, they kind of stop there and they go and they make their move and realize there's 15 other things that they haven't thought about.
Right.
And they've moved into that new role. Yeah, absolutely. They moved into that new role. And now they realize that 6 months has passed, the honeymoon period is worn off, and they're right back in a different version of where they were at before. And that's no good. So
you're saying then that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
All I'm saying with this is here's where we look at it differently. When you're looking at it with the puzzle method, those corner pieces are what we call your signature strengths, because we find, and there's tons of great research to support this now, that people are successful not from minimizing their weaknesses, but instead from really focusing on the things that they do best. And we focus on helping people find what we call their signature strengths, which are those things that you have the dispositions and experiences, etc., to be great at and are great at, but also that you get a lot of enjoyment when you're leveraging those particular strengths. And if you can spend more of your day doing that, that's amazing. So those are the corner pieces.
Okay.
Yeah. So the edge pieces are your values and what you value most in your life and career. And once you have those, and once you've done the work to identify those two pieces, it's very much like building out the frame, and you can actually start to see what's potentially in the middle for you that can create a really great career and a really great life for you.
So you can't see the middle until you've got the corners and the edges.
Exactly.
And then so you're saying additionally that people will be more happy in a role that they don't like as long as the other pieces are there than they would be if they actually love the role but hated everything else about their situation.
Not
the other pieces are
necessarily
more important than the actual role.
You know, I've actually been looking for the answer to that too. In the research that's out there does not isolate it in that particular way. So I'm not sure that I fully know the answer to that.
Okay.
What I have observed is that in either one of those situations, if one of those is drastically missing, it's going to create an undesirable situation. And for most people, and depending on which study you look at, then it's potentially as high as 87% where one of those pieces on either side, whichever scenario that you just, either one of those.
Yeah.
One of those is missing. Either they're not getting to do work that where their strengths and their talents line up with it and they enjoy the actual role itself, or vice versa, where the organization or environment or some other aspect, not necessarily in the work itself, isn't in alignment with what they want and what they value. Okay. Either one creates disparity and ultimately not a desirable situation. And it feels frustrating. You know it when you're there.
You know it when you're there, but figuring out it's hard when people are jumping in.
Yeah.
And then find themselves in that situation. What advice can you give to someone who is currently engaged in trying to make a career change? No success. Do they start with the corner? Should they start with the frame? Where do they start?
I'll give you some advice that people can use immediately. But then also, this is a much bigger question than we can typically answer in 30 minutes or 15 minutes and everything. So I'll give some additional resources too to help people out. So definitely, we want people to understand what they are great at and what they have the potential to be great at. And that is really starting with those corner pieces. And that is a must. And then the edge pieces, by all means, you have to understand what is most important to you, because what we've realized and been really, really fortunate to, through the podcast and through our platform, meet lots of people that are successful by their own standards, not successful by a society's standards necessarily, although they are that too, but successful by what actually matters to them, which is far more important. But as we have talked to those people understand what they are great at, and those people understand what they value most. And what's even more important than that is we don't get to have everything that we want. I mean, we put value on far more many things that any given person can have, no matter how much money or time or whatever you have.
Right.
That, by definition, means that the only way that you can meet your own level of success, by your own definition, is to understand what it is that you value the very most in your life. And, who are the types of people that you want to surround yourself by? What is most important to you in terms of your growth? And, what are the most important things in terms of your career? But here's one exercise particularly can help you out with strengths that anybody can do any place at any time. And that's why I love it. You can literally pull out a piece of paper, list down, leave a little bit of space in between, list down all the roles that you've worked in over the years, projects that you've worked on, volunteer, work, non-work, and then under each one, you've left a little bit of space in between each one. I want you to ask yourself two questions. What is it that I enjoyed most out of this particular role? And there's always something. Like, if nothing else, you enjoyed getting a paycheck, right? So there's always something.
Right. Or I love the coffee. Who knows? Right.
Yeah. There's always absolutely something there that you enjoyed most about, the people, the work, the environment, something, even if it's small. And then the other question is, what was I good at? Or what was I better at than the average person in this particular role, this particular place? What did I gravitate towards? And what you can do from there is, and again, anybody can do this, is be able to take out, after you've gone through and answered all of those questions for each of those roles, look at what the themes are. And inevitably, there's always a few themes. And although this is not going to be the perfect answer to your, what do I do for the next 7 steps? What it is going to do is it's going to give you a beginning. And that beginning is going to help you understand, where should I be focusing more of my time? And then you can start to evaluate from there, what are the roles that allow me to do more of my strengths more frequently? What are the companies that value those pieces? And how can I begin to understand how to align more of what I enjoy more frequently in my day? Right. So that's a really easy exercise.
That's great. Now, does that exercise work as well with people that could go in a number of different directions because they do have a lot of different skills?
Yeah. And, quite frankly, for the people that we work with, it's usually pretty skilled and pretty talented in a number of different areas. And it's more difficult for them to begin narrowing down where are the places that they want to go. So here's another resource actually that can begin to help with that. Often a lot of the coaching and programs that we do are very specifically offering targeted help for each person's situation. But another resource that people can get started in beginning to narrow it down on their own is if you go to figureitout.co, that's figureitout.co, then you can just drop in your email address and it'll enroll you for an 8-day mini course to help begin figuring out the most important pieces of what you want in your next role. And it'll help you guide you through a few different exercises over a period of about 8 days and sends it right to your email box. Oh. And that's a great way to get started moving down the path, especially if you're in the place where it's like, hey, I've got these, I'm considering this and this and this. Or you're like, I'm not even sure where to go. And I don't want to miss out on something that I've never heard of. Whatever the situation, it's a great way to be able to begin getting started.
Oh, I love that. All right. Thank you. So I come across this topic constantly, eager to hear your thoughts. People that are older and, older Gen Xers, baby boomers, worried about the potential for age discrimination in making these kinds of changes, in terms of hiring practice, et cetera. What thoughts do you have on that topic?
I have lots of thoughts. Some of them are not very politically correct, and I will.
I'm older than you are, so let's hear them.
And here's why I say that. My experience, at this point, we've helped literally thousands of people make career changes, all different ages. The oldest person that we have worked with was, I think, 72, I want to say. And the youngest person that we've worked with was like 22, 23, something along those lines, like fresh out of college, right? And lots of people at various different ages and various different roles and scopes and different levels of seniority and all kinds of stuff in between. So we've worked with nearly every type of person in nearly any profession you can think of across the board at nearly any age. And what I have observed in working with all those types of people is that, first of all, there are age discrimination at not just as you're like 50 plus, but also when you're 24.
You're right. It goes both ways.
And what's also really challenging, we're actually working on an article right now to help people understand what are the real and perceived challenges when you're in your 20s versus 30s versus 40s versus 50s. And what are the actual things that are more difficult and what are the actual advantages that you have at any given level too. And what I find is that those people that come in with the mentality of, look, I'm going to make this work for myself and I am going to leverage what I have in my advantages, those people always make successful changes every time. Yeah. It doesn't matter if they're 50.
So you're saying so everyone has advantages and everyone has disadvantages. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I have seen just as many people that are in their 50s that are complaining about millennials being entitled that are taking on an entitled mentality. And that's not helpful at any, it really isn't helpful at any level.
At any level. You're right.
So,
okay. All right.
Best piece of advice I could offer people, if they're in their 40s, in their 50s or above, is focus on those advantages. Focus on the things that you have going for you. And there might be some age discrimination out there. There might be some other things stopping you, but somebody's still going to successfully make the change, and it might as well be you. Right. When you go into it with that mentality, everything else is so much easier. And again, we've seen it happen worst case. And honestly, this is probably the un-PC part, but I have turned away many clients that were willing to pay us, but were unwilling to really focus on those advantages and continue to preach about age discrimination. And not surprisingly, you sort of manifest your own reality. So if you're very focused on the age discrimination, you're going to find it.
You're going to find it. Right. Exactly. You're right. Every age has pros and cons, real pros and cons and perceived pros and cons. So just that awareness. All right. So one or two tools that a person facing a career change cannot be without during this journey.
One or two tools that career changer cannot be without during their career journey?
Yeah. What absolutely needs to be in their toolkit?
Oh my goodness, that is a great question. I don't think I've been on many hundreds of podcasts. I don't think I've ever been asked that exact question that way. Let's see here. One or two tools that they cannot be without. Let me think about that for just a moment. I think, okay, so here's the biggest tool. It's not necessarily one particular place, but I think when you're making a career change, there's a ton of data to support this and a ton of research that's been done out there about you creating your own environment, and you adapt and conform to what that environment is. So, that's a little bit of the thought process. But with that in mind, being able to surround yourself by things that are going to make your career change easier. So one great tool that I think is so easy to do are podcasts. And obviously we're on a podcast right now.
Right.
So clearly, if you're listening, you're a fan of podcasts and everything like that. But putting in your queue those podcasts that are going to be most beneficial for the time and place where you're at right now, as opposed to just listening to any shows. And if you're making a career change, then podcasts like this are an amazing place. Podcasts like our podcast, Happen to Your Career, that's what we do. We talk about career changers on there, but finding those types of things so that you are continuously putting your focus on it, even unconsciously, are going to help you just envelop yourself in that world. And that makes it so much easier. And we see, even if we hadn't seen it in the research and the data, we see anecdotally just in the people that we work with, that when they surround themselves and completely immerse themselves in a particular change, it goes so much faster and so much more effectively.
Yeah. And it's created a supportive environment. You're absolutely right. And I didn't even know about podcasts. I just started listening a year ago to podcasts, and number one, they're free. And number two, you could put them on Mickey Mouse speed and listen to them really quickly and knock out a bunch in little incremental time.
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that I do myself. I listen to everything on either 1.5, 1.75,
1.5, yeah. Depends on the voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, gosh. I love that. I love that answer. All right, last question. What is next for you?
Oh, my goodness. What is next for us? Well, we have... I'm trying to think how to put 3 hours worth of material into 15 seconds here. We actually just got back from Austin, Texas, where we were at South by Southwest, and we recorded our podcast live down there.
I can't wait to listen. Okay.
Oh my goodness, it was so much fun. It was an amazing experience. We've never recorded the podcast live in front of people before, so it was brand new for us and absolutely helped us practice what we preach about getting outside of our comfort zones. And that is something where it was a partnership with a company and organization. And we've built this organization in Happen to Your Career where lots of people find us when they're making a career change. But really, we want to change the way that companies and organizations and people look at work and what creates fulfilling work and have that be more present in our society. So that is the type of change that we're looking to make, which means that we're going to do more with companies and organizations and not just with consumers over the next few years. So that is an impact that we really want to make in the world is change how people are looking at work and looking at fulfilling work, and have companies really treat humans like humans and use the research that we have to create more fulfilling environments. Plus, just stop and even if you're looking at it from just the productivity level, if you are incredibly engaged and loving your job, you are putting out exponentially more productivity compared to somebody.
It makes so much more sense for companies, in terms of just retention and satisfaction.
Yeah. So we will absolutely be doing more with the podcast, more speaking and consulting with organizations. But our bread and butter and what we do as a company is help people make those individual changes too. And we've got some really cool things coming up with the podcast and changes that we're making and adding in to help add even more value into people's lives and help people understand how to take all this great stuff out there, what we already know creates a happier environment, and embed it into their own lives. So I would say if you want to find out more about what it is that we're doing, look us up on iTunes or any places where podcasts are played. Search Happen to Your Career or HTYC and we'll pop right up.
Perfect. And if people want to reach out to you, shout out the website, best ways to contact you.
Absolutely. Our home base is HappentoYourCareer.com. And certainly the other way that you can get started with us is that 8-day mini course to help figure out your next career move that we mentioned earlier.
FigureItout.co.
Yep, FigureItout.co.
Okay.
Those are 2 great ways to get in touch with us and get a dose of help instantly and get familiar with our world and who we are and what we do and how we help.
Scott Anthony, I just can't thank you enough. What I love about what you have shared with us is that it sounds like everything is grounded in data and research. And so that to me just it's an added layer of comfort that this stuff works and we have the proof to show for it. So thank you.
My pleasure. I love talking about this stuff. So I so appreciate the opportunity and you asking me to come on and be able to share this type of message. And yeah, I just really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks.
You've been listening to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco. To learn more about storytelling strategies to catch the eye of today's SCIM online readers, hiring and decision makers, go to www.virginiafrancoresumes.com.